Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to take a very few minutes to talk a little bit about what quality measurement might involve in research on any topic, but especially with sexual and gender minority, and tell you a very brief story about the role of sexual minority participants in the development of our PROMIS sexual function measure. And I have to credit my colleague Catherine Flynn, with whom I've done a lot of this work. The NIH PROMIS initiative was an effort started back in 2005 to try to improve the availability of high-quality, freely available measures of self-reported health for the domains of health that were relevant across chronic diseases, right? Like physical function, anxiety, fatigue, And the National Cancer Institute, after it was funded, and Duke was one of the sites funded, said, hey, our researchers say that all of the sex measures are crummy. Would you guys try to make a sex measure? And we had no background in this whatsoever. But they said, here's $1.5 million. Would you guys try it? We're like, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And so it was a benefit, though, that we didn't know this area. We got in lots of experts to help us out. But one of the things that was impressive about this sexual function measurement arena was that all the dominant measures clearly had been designed for white, high SES, hetero couples to an astonishing degree. And so one of the things we tried to do was to make a measurement system that everyone could pick up and feel like the items applied to them and that addressed things that were important to their sexual and intimate functioning. And so that was one of the goals, as well as to make them relevant across chronic diseases. So let me just walk very briefly through some of the key steps we go through when we develop these sort of self-reported measures and just mention how we try to incorporate those perspectives. And I will say that back then, the resources were not available to seek out significant numbers of trans participants. And so that's an area where we still need to develop. Right? So the first thing we do is to look at the items that are already out there for measuring sexual function. And there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are weird and poor, right? I get aroused lying in the sun was one of the items I remember we did not use and pass through the next stage. We wanted to find out what the experience of people with different diseases, people in different age categories, and people who are gay and bisexual as well as hetero, was with how their health affected their sexual and intimate functioning. So we did focus groups, about 27 focus groups in total, a wide variety of people, to hear how people are talking about these things and what things are important to them. And we also did focus groups with clinicians in different therapeutic areas to find out what was salient for them. Then we did our best to write new items, and we took some items from other measures and tweaked them a bit. But we know that when we all sit and try to write a really clear item, it looks great to us, but as soon as you go show it to someone who's on the other side of the table, it sounds very different. And so it's really important that we sit down and do these one-on-one interviews called cognitive interviews, where we sit down with a person and we find out, how are you understanding this item? How are you coming up with your response? Are you able to make a response given the response options? Right? And it's there where it was really important for us to include people from diverse backgrounds, including explicitly sampling people with low literacy levels and sampling hetero, bi, and gay, lesbian participants, so that when everybody looks at those items, they feel like they can understand, they're speaking to me, which was not the case with a lot of our prior measures in the field. So after that's done, hopefully you've got some items that you feel like everybody understands them as intended. They're able to describe their experience with the response options you gave them. Then we went and administered those items to a large sample, almost 4,000 people in a U.S. Probability sample, and we conduct psychometric analyses on those to evaluate how the items seem to be functioning. And so overall, the PROMIS sexual function measurement system included about 5,000 people in its development. And the version 2 of this measure was described in 2015 in this article in Journal of Sexual Medicine. You can get all the details about it. If you like reams of psychometric output, you can find that there as well. And so, but what I wanted to say a few words about, though, was, well, what is this good for? Obviously, we're trying to measure the impact of disease on people's sexual functioning, but with respect to sexual minorities, what can we learn? Well, you know, we know that there are health disparities for sexual minorities. We know that sexual health is a really important component to people's quality of life, right? And prior research was pretty mixed. There was no difference between heterosexuals and sexual minorities in sexual function in some studies. There were some smaller, poor quality studies where there were a few differences noted, but there was no large US-based study of this using a more comprehensive measurement system. And so that's what we tried to do, and we published this a couple of years ago. And what we did was we took our data from our original development sample from 2013, and we recruited a new sample, a probability-weighted sample of US English-speaking adults who self-identified as gay, bisexual, or lesbian. And you know, the sample sizes, you can see we had a lot more money from NIH for the first big wave that we did for this study, but we were happy to get the money and to collect some data on this. And so what I just wanted to show you was for men and for women, comparing those domains on which there didn't seem to be any difference and domains where there were differences. And there were differences. There were significant and likely meaningful differences in sexual function and satisfaction across the groups, and the magnitude ranged, if you're geeky, from a quarter to a full standard deviation, right? And if you had an intervention that moved people one standard deviation, you'd be a millionaire, right? So there's some large effects here. Let me show you the men first. There were no differences in erectile function and orgasm ability, and gay or bisexual men had worse scores in interest, orgasm, pleasure, and satisfaction with sex life. But now here's the interesting thing. These are domains that have always been measured when people are trying to measure sexual function. But they're not the only domains that are relevant for people. And there were domains that are incredibly important to people who are engaging in a wide variety of intimate practices. And we made domains for everybody. And because we measured those, we're able to show that there were really large differences between hetero men and gay or bisexual men in terms of anal discomfort during sexual activity, oral discomfort during sexual activity, and oral dryness during sexual activity. Right? Similarly, with women, there were, whoops, that's my own self-policing timer. There were no differences in clitoral discomfort, orgasm, pleasure, or satisfaction with sex life, right? And if we had just measured the domains that are traditionally measured, we would say there were no cases where gay or bisexual women were worse off, right? But we did measure some other things, right? They were worse off with respect to labial discomfort, anal discomfort during sexual activity, oral discomfort during sexual activity, and oral dryness during sexual activity. The B and L stand for bisexual and lesbian there. And so what this is illustrating is the importance, I think, of trying to make sure that we're talking to everybody to understand what's important to everyone and try to reflect it within the measurement system. And if we don't do that, we're liable to miss some important ways in which people are suffering in some ways that we might be able to prevent. So I will stop there. Thank you.